Nina,
Nina,
I'm so happy to see you here and spend some time with you this morning. We
thank
are
you
both,
so much for inviting me. This is
of
such an
course.
honor, and it's been such a pleasure interacting with you on Substack and getting to know you and reading your writing and your
Mm.
Substack. It's just this little community is forming, right? And you know,
Yeah, it's a beautiful community. And then one of the reasons why I do this is to introduce some of my beloved favorite writers to my circle, because I'm finding that while we are very connected, there's still some silos. And it's like,
yeah.
oh gosh, everybody needs to know about Nina now.
It's so cool. It's just such a good adventure and a good venture heading out and connecting everybody.
Mm.
It makes me want to think of what I can do to help create more cohesion in this
Yeah.
area, you know?
Well, I actually, speaking of cohesion, you are, we were just speaking right before we started recording about this genre, which doesn't maybe even exist, but we're calling it climate literature.
Mhm.
And um, you are integrating a lot of different voices, including the Earth's voice, in your most recent novel. And you call it a collection of stories. I call it a novel because it feels like all the stories were connected, and to me, they all
Yeah.
lived together. And I want to get into this book with you.
Okay.
And especially because I feel like you are planting seeds of optimism and hope in a genre, like you said, it can be largely apocalyptic.
Yeah.
And as we know here on Substack, we all learn from stories.
Mhm.
And through those stories, we learn to empathize with one another. And I feel like that those are the seeds that we need to plant in order to save this planet and create a sense of cohesion with one another.
Yeah.
So,
I just really, I kind of, like I told you, I stumbled into this so-called climate literature area, and I led with passion. That's how I write. Like, what am I excited about? What do I want to explore? What matters? Human beings do things that matter, and that's what makes us unique. So that's
mhm.
I study a lot of philosophy. That's a very Heideggerian term that, the human needs things to matter. And so that, to me, that's the lead, not reading the market or, oh, I want to write climate literature, whatever, all of that. But I am completely not in the realm of apocalyptic climate literature. I personally do not find it helpful. I think the human spirit could only take so much despair and disaster and just hopelessness. So what I felt like I was writing about is every character's in response to what is going on right now. I'm not looking in the future, like, what's the Earth going to be in 2050? That's not where it is for me. It's like looking at my response, my emotional response, and then imagining into other people, characters' emotional response, and trying to put a mirror in front of the reader, like, okay, this myriad spectrum of emotional response to the world today, where I see you, and do you see yourself in this story, in these stories? And let's start talking about it. You know, Conversation is the fertile field for things to change. So I've been doing book clubs and gathering with people to talk about the emotional, the psychological response to climate change and what's going on. And it's been so helpful and healthy to start the conversation versus just carry on
Yeah.
without talking about it. So,
Yeah. And the emotional response, like you kept coming back to, that is the present moment. And
yeah,
that's, I think, what's so overlooked in these conversations. It's, solution based or apocalyptic based, but the emotion is right at the heart of where the seeds are planted, where the action must begin. And the emotions are heavy.
yeah, yeah, they really are. And, I come back, Bill McKibben says, he keeps saying, stop being an individual, join an organization. And I think that part
Mm.
of that is we talked about building cohesion and community. It's part of that. Like, you're not alone in this. And if we
Mhm.
gather, we can be a force, because those in power, oil and, gas and oil, are not going to willingly give up power. So that's
Mhm.
where consumers, citizens have to unite and say, we're a force too. I'm not just a little individual here, changing my light bulbs, and that's the end of
Yeah.
it. So I come back to that, like maybe the book, when I talk about in this ravishing world with groups and at book readings and everything, a community does start to form in the conversation that happens after I
Mhm.
talk about it, after I read. It's like, well, I'm doing this, a pollinator garden. I got my neighbor to plant one, and we're going to do a whole neighborhood of that kind of gardening. It's like, so all of a sudden we find these ideas and solutions. And also, I'm sad. I can't believe this is happening. And what are my children going to inherit? So that comes up too. But we can hold it. We can build the container for it, versus I'm alone in my room and I am so filled with existential dread of what's coming. So,
Mhm. Absolutely. I love your passion for this. And I love that we just jumped right into this. I want to back up a little bit
okay.
because I want to introduce sort of how I was introduced to you. I'm kind of bubbling with your passion though right now. It's like I just want to continue talking about In This Ravishing World, your book. Um, but that said, I actually fell in love with you when I discovered Stunning Sentences.
Mhm.
And this is one of your offerings on Substack,
Mhm.
where you wrote two best-selling books, I believe, along the same theme. And essentially, to let our listeners know, you just excavate the hows and the whys of delicious prose. And I want to know, back up, where did your passion for dissecting this style in writing, where did that originate?
Well, as a young reader, and I'm thinking 11 or 12, I kind of started writing down sentences that excited me. I found like old journals. So way back, way back then, I was drawn to language and sentences that did something different. Now,
Wow.
back then, I couldn't articulate why. And then even now, putting what feels like ineffable into language is a little difficult. But it was like I'd read something even back then that had a different rhythm, a different sound, a different structure, syntactical structure, and it woke me up. It's like, I've never seen this before. Or the other thing that would happen is that I felt my interior world was in some way captured in that sentence, and it put into language, it articulated for that 12-year-old me what I couldn't say, but there it was, and I'd write it down because I wanted to keep it. Like, oh, that's it. That's what I'm feeling. And the sentence is shaking that feeling inside of me. So there was a pairing, in a way, of reality, and language is the representation of reality, but that gap seemed to close with a really great sentence.
Oh. So it was almost like it was mirroring some sort of emotional mirroring that you were needing in your life, but you were finding
Definitely.
that through sentences.
I was. And I continued with it. But then, I had taught for years at the University of San Francisco in the MFA program, and they said, here, do you want to teach this class, Style and Fiction? And that was about 17 years ago. And so I was just starting out. I'd earned my MFA, but no one had taught at that level, the precise, diction, syntax, imagery, sound, rhythm, and breaking down all the elements of style, imagery,
Yeah.
schemes and tropes. So I kind of, went in and taught myself all of it and read as
Mhm.
much as I could to figure out grammar and figure out not just grammar, because I am fascinated by what grammar can do in terms of generate meaning
Yeah.
and sound. So what I'm teaching, I think, myself first, and then students at the university and now on Substack, is how to write from the body. What if you generate sound and rhythm? That's what the body feels.
Mhm.
So you're creating at the sentence level a real reality, reality that cannot be denied. Like I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it. versus just a bland sentence that's just conveying information or moving the story along. It's a profound difference. It's like, no, we want to speak not just to the brain, but just to the entire body to feel the rhythm. From I've read developmentally from, 0 to the age of 7 months, we listen to rhythm. Da, da. We're hearing the rhythms of it, and that's really what we're focused on in terms of language. And then after about that time, developmentally, we look at precise or feel the precise sound. But the body is first reacting. And if you think of when you're in the womb or whatever, it's like it's first the rhythm and sound.
Yeah.
That's
And
how
we think
language
of
is coming
the
in.
body sensing, but in a way, what you're saying is that the body, it's more than sensing, it understands.
And yeah,
Pre-verbal.
well, with students, I'd have them, okay, so stand behind a closed door and just listen to the sound on the other side of the door. Like, so you can't really understand the words, just like, what is it? Is it harsh? Stop. Stop doing it. Don't do it again. It's like, okay, those are a lot of plosives coming in. These
Yeah.
are sounds that explode from the mouth.
Mm.
So don't, the D's and the T's and the P's and the B's. Like, that's very different than let's sit down and read a story and, snuggle together in the bed. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a flowing motion, right? And it's soft. So how are you going to capture that? So
Wow.
I'm going back to kind of trying to maybe pair or merge the pre-verbal and the verbal so that we remember the oral quality of language that the
Yeah.
body is responding to, not just, oh, I got more information in my brain so the
Mm.
story can move along.
You're making me think of have you read any of Ocean Vuong's
Yeah.
work?
Oh, yeah.
Top
Exactly.
number one favorite book.
Yeah.
It's somewhere right here, and I'm going to destroy the title because I have a terrible memory. But the something about where is it?
Once we're breathe gorgeous or something, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well,
Once we're briefly
I've
gorgeous or something like that. But his,
anytime a poet moves into prose, I'm excited. Like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, because that's where they are training the ear. That's where they spend their time. Like,
Hmm.
and parsing out just, 5 words. What's the
Yeah,
rhythm? Is it iambic? Is it didactic? It's just like, what
yeah.
is the rhythm there? What's the sound?
Well, and also because his first language was Vietnamese, from my understanding, a lot of, there's this words don't necessarily from one language convey the same thing in another language. And so he was trying to use English to convey something slightly different. And so actually, even the translation, the actual cognitive translation was more metaphorical. It almost had a little synesthesia to it.
Mm.
And that was just so thrilling to me.
Yeah.
So, okay, what was one of your favorite books? I mean, I know you probably have some favorite books now, but going back to that 12-year-old, do you remember
Well,
what?
no, because this is what I did. I have a 13-year-old son, so I've watched his evolution as a reader. So at some point they say, okay, stop reading children's books and move to chapter books. So I did that. But then I leapfrogged. I found them in the library. They were all the classics in big print. So at a really young age, I was reading, all the classics, Jane Eyre and Mark Twain, and just I was because I wanted to, I don't know what I was doing, but I would get these, they were like 8 by 10 inch books because the words were huge and they
Mm-hmm.
were thick. But so I read all the classics again, probably, in fifth or sixth grade. I don't remember any of them, but I was so drawn to the language that was happening in there
Yeah.
that kind of elevated what I wanted to do as a writer eventually. And we can talk about that took a long time, but
Mhm.
also just sink into that prose that wasn't chapter book with simple sentences for the most part, or a compound sentence now and then, but these intricate ways of writing. It was just so I just leapfrog. Now, looking back, watching my son and reading with him, I've always loved Roald Dahl, uh, just his language and the playfulness of it. And he plays with sound, just like making up words and just so fun. And then later in life, I couldn't believe it when I read Virginia Woolf and what she could do with a sentence. So, and it defied everything the English teachers taught me. It's like, what?
So let me read a sentence. And
Okay.
now I'm embarrassed to read a sentence because you're listening for the rhythm and I'm probably going to totally ruin it. But I want to hear what you hear. This is actually from one of your recent posts in Stunning Sentences,
Mhm.
and it's through Faulkner's Absalom. Absalom, am I pronouncing that correctly? So you, and this is one of the sentences you dissected. He says, "This was the mother, the dead sister Ellen. This Niobe with tears, who had conceived to the demon in a kind of nightmare, who even while alive had moved, but without life, and grieved, but without weeping, who now had an air of tranquil and unwitting desolation, not as if she had either outlived the others or had died first, but as if she had never lived at all."
Wow.
So what do
Wow.
you hear?
Oh, I hear so much. So, first of all, compression. There's so much happening in this sentence. I think this took me, like, I dissected it and I walked around the block, dissected it again, walked around the block. It probably took me 2 hours of just feeling it, going through it. What else am I feeling about this? That's a big starting point. What am I feeling? So this declaration, this was the mother, the dead sister Ellen. It's almost like a solemn statement.
Yeah.
And, it's like, and already I feel the dead. This was the mother, the dead sister Ellen, just kind of choppiness and again, solemn. And this Niobe, then she transforms. It's like, wait a minute. Now she's a statue. I looked up, I didn't know what this Niobe, it's a stone statue that's always crying tears. But
Yeah.
this Ellen did not have tears. So that image comes in. It's like, okay, she's so full of grief, but she can't even cry. She's so
Yeah.
overwhelmed with it. Then, as Faulkner likes to do, I feel like I've sunk to the bottom because these are all past perfect who had conceived, who
Mm.
even had moved but without life. So here I am. This was the mother, and suddenly I'm what Virginia Woolf calls tunneling. I'm going into the deep past. So
Mm.
the present is merging in a way with the deep past because it's all in one sentence. And Faulkner is famous for saying, the past is. I'm gonna butcher this, but the past is always with us. And so
Yeah.
in this one sentence, it's like, yes, it is absolutely. But then we get this nice, beautiful rhythm, even though it's despairing and full of sorrow, who even while alive had moved but without life, and grieved but without weeping. So you hear the rhythm, right?
Yeah.
But without life, but without weeping. So there's like, oh, this little wave happens there because
Yeah.
the echo. And then we have the balance, who now had an air of tranquil and unwitting desolation. So the balance there of twos, tranquil, unwitting desolation. But he varies it a little bit. And then this was brilliant. I'd never written a sentence like this. So we have a correlative conjunction, two of them.
Mhm.
Faulkner loves the not but, or not also, not as if she had, and then we have either or. So another correlative conjunction in the middle of it. So he builds these like envelopes. I like to think of them as envelopes, these correlative conjunctions. Like I'm going to pack this stuff in the envelope, not as if she had either outlived the others or, so we have the either or, had died first, but, so here comes the other part of the correlative conjunction, as if she had never lived at all. And it's just such a finality to it. It's like, oh my
Oh,
God, we went
yeah.
through all this life, conceiving, living, you know, living without weeping, and then, but she never lived at all.
Yeah.
So a great build at the end. It's like, oh my God, this is it. Just, she's been dead the whole time. So it was just so amazing.
It's thrilling to have you dissect, and I always loved English, and I always loved grammar and all those things. I think I geeked out on, but nobody ever shared this sort of deep excavation that you do and the passion for it. And it just when I read, I hear you now, and I feel the passion, but I even read that passion in your posts every week. And it's, I'm imagining there's a part of you that loves sharing it because
Yeah.
obviously you do, but that mean, is there a point where you just felt like it was overflowing in you and you had to teach others what
Well,
you were
I mean,
feeling?
so backing up, yeah, I've taught, 17 years in the classroom, and the class would be, 20, it was a popular class, like 20, 25 people in there. And
Mm.
I felt like it was a 15-week class, a big orchestra, because I'd have them bring in their favorite sentences. So let's say I had 25, I started with like 25 sentences from students, like choose a sentence that you've read and you wish you wrote. Because then I get their passion in the room. Like, oh, I love this sentence. And then I use it. So it's like, okay, we're going to use, Jane's sentence this week and take it apart. And then we're reading text at the same time. So I assign like poetry and um, fiction, and we take sentences, and so we're working on those sentences. It just felt like this orchestra of style coming in and voices coming in and creativity coming in. And then I had finished a 10-week class for Stanford like that, and we were having so much fun, and everyone was so excited. It's like, I don't want to stop. And that's when the Substack started. It's like, because I was so into it, and everybody was so into it. It's like, well, maybe someone else would like this. It was just a passion thing. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, we're having fun. Maybe someone else will think this is fun. I don't know. Maybe this is really geeky, or I don't, I had no idea. It's just like, let's try it.
I mean, this passion is something that I think people don't even know they have for language until you plant these seeds for them. I'm imagine you see that happen in students where it's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
learning these things, and then all of a sudden, like, wow, and it is like music in a way. I want to
Yeah.
ask you, are you a musician?
I'm not. Believe it
But
or
you are.
not, I'm not. I am, but I was thinking about this because, like, how do I hear so much? For years, in addition to writing and teaching writing and creative writing, I teach fitness classes, and there's always music.
Yeah.
So I put myself through law school by teaching 9 fitness classes a week. And at college, I taught as a moneymaker, just like, but I loved it too. So I was
Yeah.
constantly listening or hearing and moving to the beat.
Mhm. Hmm. I was
So,
a ballerina for years. And to me, so I was raised on classical music. And in fact, also my mother would always play classical music in the morning before breakfast. And it was just something that would be on the classic radio station in the corner of the kitchen. And there, and I had taken piano lessons and Suzuki method and all of that. Music was somewhat a part of my life, but mostly through dance. And for me, I think when I
mhm.
read your sentence excavations, I feel like a dancer again. I feel my body
Mm,
respond. It's like, oh, there's like I actually want to move. And even hearing you read this Faulkner sentence and the little fragments in there, it's like it is such a natural part of being human to feel
yeah,
that rhythm. And
yeah,
I just don't think uh, typically we think about conveying a message and we're just it's just that it's just a
yeah,
message and nothing more. But when you going back to the very beginning of our conversation, you talked about humans wanting something to matter,
yeah,
and I think what you're doing is that you're bringing meaning into our language, which is a deeper meaning into our language that connects us.
yeah. And it's also, I think, now that you say it that way, I just finished a fascinating book, How to Be Animal. It's nonfiction
Mhm.
by Melanie Challenger. And for so long, we have not wanted to be animal, which has led to the devastation of a lot of ecological systems, that we're better than the animal. We're exceptional. Therefore, we're not animal. And yet we are. We have evolved from, if you look at, over the course of deep time, we've evolved from animal, and we still are. And part of it is the body, right? The intellectuals would rather just stay in the brain and not feel the body, not and the body will die. The body, I think there's that anger too, like there's a deterioration of the body. I wish I wasn't a body, but we are. We are embodied. So to bring language back into the body and want you to move and want you to feel it and experience it like a music, even at the prose level, is so exciting for me, and to teach other students or whoever wants to learn, like there's a whole other way to write from the body.
From the body. I was just thinking about last night I'm writing an essay right now on in defense of fog, and not
Mm,
just the external fog, but fog, even like brain fog and
yeah,
these different states of
that's
forgetfulness.
yeah,
They're always a little bit of just an exercise for me. And I was trying to imagine being an earthworm last
yeah,
night as I was falling asleep.
yeah,
And similar to what you were saying, this experiencing and this understanding of life
hmm,
before, I don't want to cut my head off, but imagining that the understanding is enough just by what my body is absorbing from the loamy soil. And
yeah.
it actually put me to sleep. It was
Oh
quite
wow.
soothing.
Well, so much of language is pre-verbal or out of the verbal.
Mhm.
That's something that's fascinating as well, is to capture the gesture or the expression, or where your character's standing in a room, because so much language is communicated non-verbally.
Yeah.
So if you're a earthworm, right, stuck in the dark, it's all going to be sensate data coming in, no language. So
Yeah.
what are you feeling?
Yeah. It was very good for my nervous system. I have to say, I think I'll
Wow.
return to the earthworm state many
Wow.
times. That the darkness
Yeah.
for sure, and the muffled sound, and then imagining the fog above
Yeah.
the earth that was a heavy blanket. All of it was just, oh, in our overstimulated world, it was quite a
Yeah.
nice place to be.
Wow. And not claustrophobic. I think I'd get claustrophobic under the earth.
No, I was always the little girl in the smallest room, like I liked the small spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, that was big spaces and too many choices are overwhelming for my
Okay.
brain.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So we're kind of already talking about this, but I have a question for you. In a way, you've already said what you're sort of hoping to awaken in
Hmm.
your readers and writers, and I want to know a little bit more about that, but then how this might change how one lives, because this isn't
Yeah.
clearly isn't just about how changing how one writes.
No, it isn't. It's well, I've nodded to writing for the body and the musicality and the rhythm, so feeling that and trying to close the gap between representational, which is language, and reality, which is how you're experiencing things, to try to close that gap so that the sentence can mimic it as much as possible, so that you're writing, sure, yes, for understanding, but also the body has a aesthetic moment, or pleasure reading it. um, I love Elaine Scarry. She writes on beauty and being just. I'm going to read a little something. This willingness continually to revise one's own location in order to place oneself in the path of beauty is the basic impulse underlying education. I love that. And this is also from her book, Beauty Quickens. It adrenalizes. It makes the heart beat faster. It makes life more vivid, animated, living worth living. So I think, as a culture, we tend to degrade or downplay the aesthetic life, but there's so much pleasure. I know during the pandemic, I would walk around and hunt out things that would give me awe, and that were beautiful. I live in a more rural area, and there's a lot of it. So that became a salvation, like she's saying, it saves us. But I think we
Oh,
could do that at the language level too. Like, oh, you'll get, oh, what beautiful prose, what gorgeous writing or whatever. That's the aesthetic life. That's pleasure. And we need it.
we
It
need it.
shouldn't be secondary. It's part of the human spirit that needs it. So
Mm,
to be able to help writers create like that and give readers that for a moment of like, oh, this was just so beautiful, and the whole body relaxes and there's
mm,
intense pleasure. Now, like you said, this is to do it, write a sentence like this and do this practice is close paying attention. That's what it is, a life practice.
yeah.
Right now, I'm teaching for Stanford reading. It should be as a writer, but it's like a writer. And I'm taking apart entire stories and kind of doing the same thing. So this is how close of a reader you need to be to essentially get the writer's education. This is all part of the writer's education and part of paying the practice of paying attention. How one word can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that paying attention, beauty is revealed often.
Yeah,
And like you, when you were little Nina at 11, 12 years old, you were not just experiencing beauty, but it was mirroring something inside of you. So
yeah.
perhaps in a way, beauty, paying attention and discovering this beauty also helps us discover our own beauty and
It does. I mean, I
sacredness.
even back then I'd write the sentence down so I wouldn't forget it. I've in my 11, year old handwriting. It was almost like, oh, somebody, something out there understands the interior space of me,
Mm,
and it's valuable enough they wrote it down. Therefore, it's valid. So these, little
wow.
steps that I think I went through, like validation, and it exists. It's not ephemeral. There it is on the page. Yes, I exist. And
Mm.
this is of value to have this feeling, this experience.
What a bright young woman you were. I mean, obviously now I have grown into even more, but so perceptive as a young girl to be discovering this about the world and about yourself. I applaud her.
Thank you.
So let's circle back since we started this conversation with your incredible book, In This Ravishing World. And it won a W.S. Porter Prize for short story collections and a Prism Prize for climate literature. So there they are. It is a genre.
Yeah.
um, and we did talk a little bit about your intent for writing this, but let's dive in a little bit more. Is there anything else that you want to say about how this came about for you?
Two other things. So I have friends that are in the ecological sphere and scientists, and they kept telling me basic facts are not working. We need stories. And what they were saying is that facts speak to the mind, right? I can tell you the CO2 level is now this, and it used to be this. Stories speak to the heart. They move, they move. We find this in the Bible with parables. We find this in politics, the little anecdotes they tell. They're trying to move emotionally people from one path to another. So when I heard that, it's like, and during the pandemic, it's like, okay, I'll try to write something about what's happening now. Because again, like I said, during the pandemic, I kept heading outside and hiking hills and more hills. And I'd take my 13-year-old, well, he was younger then, but we'd go hiking all the time. And that was the other thing, is watching my son during one of the wildfires. He loves basketball, and he went to go play basketball, but there's all this smoke. So I rounded up an N95 mask, and we went out, and he lasted about 15 minutes, and we had to come home. It's like, is this the future? Is this the future for children, the next generation or the third generation or the seventh generation? Is this what they're getting? Is this what they're leaving? And I don't want this to be the legacy, and I want to do something. I want to do something. So this will be it. So those were two big motivating forces. And then go out and talk about it and try to get other people to do something.
Yeah. And it sounds like through writing this book and then now having these conversations, it really is activating something in your readers to do something and to feel something, and not numb out and dissociate from all the news, the
Yeah.
horrors of it. One of the techniques you also used in this book is you wrote from the perspective of the earth, which
Hmm.
was, oh, I mean, talk about trying to create a sense of empathy in your readers.
Yeah.
This was it's so beautiful to read from the perspective of the
Thank
earth,
you.
and I want to know what that was like, and if you had any specific exercises that you did to try to
Yeah.
get in touch with her voice.
Yeah. Well, it's a first person omniscient voice. Every other, the humans are third person. But I wanted this voice, first person, because it's intimate, right? It's talking right to you. There's a direct kind of address to the reader. That's who the nature, the earth is talking to. In the beginning, when I first started out, it was really hard to, writers crawl into the skin of the other over and over, usually other characters, but to become something that is as expansive and huge as Earth. At my first attempts, it was full of anger. The Earth was angry at the Homo sapien, and I said, "Well, no, wait a minute. It wants humans to listen. I can't be yelling. That's not what it would do." So I had to get out of the way. And then I thought about, well, what is the earth feeling? Well, it's feeling sad too. It wishes it wasn't here in this spot it is in now, dealing with this. I put in there, it wishes it could be thinking about dirt and birds and trees and not, you know, the devastation or the extinction of entire species. So it has compassion, and it started to be more compassionate for humans and what they're going through because it's going through something similar. And that made sense to me because we're so intertwined. And we are nature. We're it's not one or the other. We're not in an either or. So it's like, okay, that's the right tone. And the other big piece was thinking like, my God, it has a huge different sense of time. It's been around for 4.5 billion years. And the Homo sapien is like, in that frame, like 19 seconds on this earth compared to that time frame. So it's a huge container of experiences. It's been devastated by a meteorite hitting it, and it went through an ice age. So it has recovered. A lot was wiped out at those times, but it has carried on. So it would have a bigger view of things and not just be narrow viewed into just anger all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those two things really help.
Wow. And so did a lot of this thinking happen on walks or like eyes closed? How do you sort of embody the voice of the earth?
Yeah, it was really discovery on the page. It
Wow.
was really just trying over and over, and sometimes it would be too poetic.
Mm,
And then I'd say, I have to come back to colloquial language and weave that in.
mm,
So my process is I don't work, chronologically. Just write scenes like, oh,
mhm,
this will be a fun scene to write. I'll write that today. And then I print out whatever I write at the end of the day. And at night, I go through it at the sentence level, the language level. And then that's my way in the next day through language and changes on yesterday's work. And then I create, I inch forward. It's like, okay, this is better. Yeah, I'm liking this. I'll inch forward. I keep going.
yeah,
And then I print that out. So I'm revising and creating at the same time.
yeah.
And so that just getting that voice, and I don't count. Someone always asks, like, how long did it take you? I was like, I have no idea. So I don't know. I don't track time. I don't track word count. I just track,
Mm,
did I write today? Did I print it out? And did I do my little, like, at the language level that makes me excited to go back the next day and write again?
mm. You're almost like a shaman. I'm listening to, and I think like there's a shamanic way that you interact with words and language, and
Mhm.
there's an alchemy that sounds like on the page happens for you. Um, I feel like, do you feel like you learn something new about yourself in this process? And also, how about your relationship to the earth?
Yeah. Well, the huge thing, I mentioned it, is deep time. And that's a concept from John McPhee in
Mm,
his book, Basin and Range. It was published in 1981. So there's a chapter toward the end where the earth and slash nature goes back to the beginning of time and looking at the single cell micro animal to the multicell to the plant to the tree to mammals to and I after going through that and then I had my scientist friends double check because they're really looking at fossil record to determine deep time, so it's a little fuzzy. You get kind of a big range. It's like we're not sure where this fossil is in time, maybe 10,000 years ago, maybe 70. So they helped me kind of narrow down. But oh my God, after I did that, it's like how much I owe the inheritance, like what we have inherited,
yeah,
how much I owe the earth, how much I owe, this planet for providing. It's a life planet. We have water, we have oxygen, we have sun, we have plants, we have, things to eat. Like how much is owed to what came before us and how much is owed to the future. So I feel completely indebted to the evolutionary track that began 4.5 billion years ago after meticulously going through it and understanding all that life had to go through to get to us.
yeah,
And it completely changed me. And I'm heartbroken, but I'm angry and I'm trying to be risk taking and courageous to do what I can.
yeah,
All those things.
yeah,
And you say I'm shamanic, but I also have a highly analytical side to me.
yeah,
And so it's this weird kind of thing of like work with passion, step back. Is it making sense?
mm,
How is this flowing logically? What is this doing? Go back in passion, step back. So this
mhm,
kind of intensity and then move back diffusion. Okay, what's the big picture? What are you
yeah,
creating? Go back in. That kind of that expansion, contraction.
yeah. Like a conductor of an orchestra, you have the
Yeah.
precision of understanding every single note and nuance, and also just the gestalt, the passion, this sound as a whole and how it moves you. I mean, it's like you're able to exist in both of those worlds, and it seems like you fluidly move back and forth between them.
It's fun. It's really
Mm,
fun. And my standard is, does it make me feel alive? And it
yeah,
does. So the
yeah,
days I
yeah.
don't do this, right? I don't feel as alive.
I remember a quote, and I remember thinking that, oh, well, this is such a first world quote, but there's actually some truth to it. And it was, do not ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because what the world truly needs is
Yeah.
more people that have come alive. And yes, there are lots of needs as well, but that aliveness is food
Yeah.
for thought and
That, yeah.
invention and
And,
connection.
and it and it gives permission when someone sees you alive, authentic is whatever that means. I have problems with that word because we're
Mhm.
in the milieu of the society and we inherit a lot of things. But
Mhm.
it gives permission to other people to be that way. It's
Yeah,
like, go ahead. You don't have to deaden around me. You don't
yeah,
have to push it down. It's like, go ahead, feel
yeah.
it.
And I think that leads me to this question I have, because you do carry this optimism. And in the book as well, the collection of stories, there is a sense of there's honesty for the reality of the situation, and there's an optimism. And I struggle personally with that. I can get kind of like
Mhm.
where there's a part of my brain that wants to check out. It's the same thing I was describing earlier. If I'm at Costco, there's too many things going on. I just, something wants to shut down. And you, on the other hand, are staying present and alive through this dramatic shift we are experiencing on this planet. So for what is it that is the most important to rouse this sense of hope and
Mhm.
inspire a refusal to be indifferent?
Yeah. There's several things that I rely on. And it's not that I don't turn away. Now and then, like watching the Hurricane Helena now and all the images, I can only
Mhm.
take so much during the day.
Mhm.
And we get the message, take care of your body, but also take care of your mind, your mental health. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's enough because I'm really starting to feel that hopeless. So it's enough. So all my scientist friends, the moment, when I'm feeling despair, I'll reach out and I'll say, okay, do something. Just do something. Write about it. Call your legislator. I belong to two environmental groups. I
Mm.
work for a group called Children for Change, help children speak up for change in the world. So
Mm.
whatever it is, whatever fits your schedule, your life, find something to do. And then Bill McKibben, stop being an individual, join something and be
Mm.
part of it. This movement is trying to, shift the paradigm. We need
Yeah.
alternative energy, a lot of it. Um, and then I just read a quote by Catherine Hayhoe, who's a climate scientist, and she's quoting St. Augustine. Hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage, sorry. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not have to remain as they are.
Mm.
So that coupling is really important. Yes, I don't accept what's happening. I'm not going to just be complacent or say, oh, that's the way it is. No. But then I think the courage is necessary to do the action.
Yeah.
So, and then that one more thing, Rebecca Solnit, I read a lot of her work. She reminds us that the future's not yet written. It isn't.
Mm.
And
Mm.
the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a body of the United Nations, whenever it's graphing where we are in climate change, they're the body that's monitoring scientifically what's going on. There's 4 graphs for the future. So
Mm.
what we're doing today will determine which of those 4 we're going to end up on in the future.
Mm.
So it's not set, right? So we still have, these actions, we're getting to the wire, but if we make some big changes now, we have a different future. So these are the things. Finally, the youth movement is, as you see in the book, right? The youth movement, they're
Yeah.
not scared. It's their future. It's like
Yeah.
the Sunrise Movement is doing amazing things.
Mm.
Youth are suing in court. There's a case in
Mhm.
California right now, suing the government and suing also oil and gas for what they've done to the planet. So the
Mm.
youth movement is really strong and they're committed and they're, obstinate.
Mm. And if I were the earth, I would feel pretty excited about the youth. I mean,
Yeah.
that to me is like, oh, my children understand and my children believe in me. And it almost makes me want to cry when I think about the way you ended your
Mm,
collection of stories with the Earth's observation, watching her children, watching the protesting humans, and suddenly feeling springtime.
yeah.
I mean, and I just love that you even use that word because, of course, spring is a natural phenomenon for the Earth, but this is a different, deeper springtime that she
Mhm.
experiences. And I just want to read, unless you have it, because I would love for you to read it, but where
No,
you
you don't have it. Go ahead.
okay, okay. She says, the Earth says, I am in the grip of this, an odd concentration. I didn't think I'd ever feel this again because I've been in tatters like a woman in a beautiful dress, with pieces of her fabric ripped off, one section after another, and I'm left with only a shoulder strap, a strip of fabric down my back. I admit I did some of the ripping. I let myself sink too far from the warm rays of hope. I thought she, Eleanor, one of the characters, and I were alike, barely hanging on, up to our necks in despair. But she's done something that's taken her beyond herself, out of herself. And this resurgence of hope that the earth feels in understanding that humans have the capacity to step outside of themselves. And
Yeah.
I love how you draw this interconnectedness between the human response and the earth response and our inseparable renewable spirit. And I'm feeling like this interconnection is a ultimately what you're saying. It's a contract written with love at its center. I
Mhm.
mean, I think everything that the earth has birthed, the earth and the sun, is a love story.
Mhm.
And I want to understand or hear you say what the implications of this kind of grand love are. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that?
Well, yeah. So that interconnectedness, even the the realization that the earth exists. This goes against the rich Western tradition inherited by Descartes and Kant that the self is sovereign. And they put the focus on the mind and consciousness. And I have to say, it's a completely phenomenological reduction. So
Mm-hmm.
they confirm the reality of the mind and human consciousness, and what came with that is human exceptionalism, and everything else was turned into an object,
Mm-hmm.
including everything on this earth was an object, and a hierarchy was created. Now, the indigenous population never saw it this way. Heidegger came along and said, we are beings in the world. That's why I continue to read him.
Mm-hmm.
We are intertwined with the world. To be human is to be intertwined with nature, the planet. And this involves, a deep respect for the other, the planet, beings in the world, all the non-humans, and it's admiration and respect. It's what we owe, and it's our responsibility and our love. It's what makes us human. I mean, I
Yeah.
give myself now and then a thought experiment when I feel myself go numb, and you go outside, you erase a tree, just
Mm-hmm.
erase it. And what do you feel? Now erase everything around you, all the plants. I'm looking at all the trees in my window, the flowers, the bushes. Imagine they're all gone. How do you feel? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel devastated, and I feel
Yeah.
completely and utterly alone. And
Yeah.
then bring them back, put them back. It's like, oh my God, I'm so full of awe. And my humanness is back, and I feel alive. I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a thought experiment I do. And
Wow.
my students are feeling lonely or whatever. It's like, okay, try this, to marvel, to be in awe, and to feel that interconnection, that you aren't alone. Intertwined with everything around you.
I'm imagining doing that thought experiment myself, and I would even feel like part of me would just disappear. Like I would dissolve too. And
Exactly.
maybe some of that comes from just sort of similar to you. We both live rural and our landscape and the livelihood around us is so much a part of who I am that I
Yeah.
don't know who I would be if that disappeared or if
Right.
I would even exist.
Right.
Certainly not the I that I am now.
Right. But we are still, most people still operate with the subject object, which is
Hmm.
a Cartesian framework.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to say the objects then are to be used, they're resources for us.
Right.
And it's a hierarchy versus no, let's see what is really true. What's underneath that?
Hmm. So the implications of this kind of love are that we need each other in a way.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're saying. I mean, we absolutely, I mean, sometimes I think, well, I'll ask you, do you think the earth needs us?
Yeah, I do. It
Mm.
needs us because we have so shaped it and we're so part of the earth.
Yeah.
It needs us to take care, to love
Mm.
it and take care.
Mm.
It really does. I mean, I really hate when climate scientists say, don't worry, even if humanity and all non-humans or whatever you want to call them die, the earth will carry on. It's like that doesn't that doesn't do it for me. That's
Yeah.
not an answer. I'm sorry.
That reminds me of Robin Wall Kimmerer in Braiding Sweetgrass. Have you read that yet? It's just
Yeah.
gorgeous. But one of her she sort of explores this relationship between the earth and humans, and for her, ultimately, our responsibility as humans, other than caretaking, is gratitude. She comes
Yeah.
back to that that is one of the roles, and it's not to be diminished.
Yeah.
One of the roles that we have as humans is to feel gratitude for the earth, which is just what you are doing in that thought experiment.
Yeah. That is it. I mean, just and all the we've inherited from this long line of evolution. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That and that piece, that section I wrote of Earth thinking about deep time. It's like it was so excited for the Homo sapien to come along. And they were so smart when they realize all that has been given to them
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and be grateful. So the other thing I
Yeah.
love about braiding sweetgrass, sorry, is all the languages, or 70% of the language is verbs. They're not nouns.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's not a bay. It's not the ocean. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
tree. It's to be a tree, to be the ocean, to be a
Yes.
bay, which means it's a verb, which means it's action, which means it has agency, which means we could learn from it. It's
Yeah.
completely different mind shift.
You're right. Takes us completely out of the Cartesian object, subject object world.
Right.
Suddenly,
It's much more relational if you view everything as a verb.
yeah. Which is, I mean, you even said that about going back to, so that's the macrocosm. The microcosm are these little sentences. And even there, you talk about how you love sentences that are alive. So, Nina, we're at our hour point here, and I just think, in a way, your role on this planet is to breathe life into everything. I mean, you are with me, you have with me, and all that you've shared, and through your treasure of a
Thank you.
book. And it's quite stunning, even though that's your word of your that you use in stunning sentences. But your role on this planet is also quite stunning. And I thank you
Wow.
for your
Thank
wisdom.
you. Well, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Thank you.